Real stories, real people, real heroes. The Real Heores Network.
All right. Hello and welcome to the first official episode of the Real Heores on the Real Heores Network here on YouTube. I am your host, Jesse, aka Blessy Caban. If you're wondering why I sound familiar, it's because I am also the host, or I guess kind of co-host of the Stop Drop podcast. I know what some of you guys are thinking. Oh my God, what happened to the podcast? Don't worry, we're still up and running. Originally, I guess taking that from the beginning. So when I started the podcast, what I wanted to do is kind of cover multiple different topics, just about everyday life. You know, in the midst of recording, I realized that my first 3 or 4 guests are mostly just focused around inspirational people who overcame challenges, built something for themselves, and it was great. But after a few weeks, I started to realize that I really wasn't what we were recording really wasn't what my original vision was, but I didn't just want to drop what I was doing without really realizing what was happening. I built a pretty strong following and I had a lot of positive responses that I needed to find a way to kind of incorporate into what I wanted to do. And that's how the Real Heores Network was created. The Real Heores Network is my YouTube channel. Basically, it's designed to continue on these interviews, to recognize individuals, shine light on real heroes in our everyday lives. You'll hear stories from people who overcame obstacles, beat the odds, and were able to create a life for themselves that they really didn't think was possible. I wanted to make sure that I share these stories with anyone and everyone who's willing to tune in and listen. So, you're probably wondering why I split them from YouTube to the podcast. Well, mainly is I personally had a lot of great feedback and a lot of great success with the podcast with these interviews, but I wanted to be able to target different audiences. So I figured by putting these interviews on YouTube, it would appeal to a larger audience just because everyone's style of listening is different. Some people can sit down and listen to a podcast for an hour. Some people have a 5-minute attention span, but if they're watching a video on it, they tend to tune in a little bit more. So trying my hand at YouTube. I may or may not also throw these on the podcast from time to time. So we're just trying to figure out and see what happens there. But with this being the first official episode, I figured, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just go for it. See how it works out. And if we don't like it, we can just edit this all out anyway. But without further ado, you're probably wondering who I'm sharing this screen with. No, that's not Harrison Ford over there. It's my brother-in-law, Mr. Zach Merook. Zach, how's it going, buddy?
Good, man. Good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Last night we went out for Mancha's bachelor party.
Oh, there you go, dude.
So I'm feeling good. I'm a little rough, but I'm feeling pretty good. I could be doing much worse.
Seen your snap stories, little bucket pong going on.
Yeah, I mean, we had to get the little, you know how that is. But we had a good time. For those of you who don't know, Zach is my brother-in-law. I've known Zach for a while. He's a really good guy. When I first met Zach, I didn't really know too much about him, but Zach is, well, at least in my opinion, pretty open book. So he was, kind of telling me about his background and upbringing within the first few weeks of us knowing each other. Ended up becoming pretty cool. And after listening to Zach's story, I thought this would be a really good person to have on the podcast and now the YouTube channel, just because I figured some of the struggles and some of the things that Zach's dealt with before are pretty relatable, especially now in today's day and age. And so wanted to have him on here, talk about some issues in his life, some things that he's dealt with, some battles that he's overcome, kind of what steps he took and right along the way, what obstacles he had to overcome, and then where he is today. So we'll keep it short and sweet for everybody there. But Zach, did you want to maybe start off with an introduction, tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, man, absolutely. So, contrary to how Jesse made it seem, we've known each other for more than a couple weeks. All right. Unfortunately, we've known each other for a couple of years now. No, but as far as you said, me being an open book, I kind of don't have a choice, if you will. So like you said, like usually right off the bat, the question always gets brought up when there's alcohol around and somebody offers me a drink and I'm like, hey, I don't drink, because they always look at me funny. You know what I mean? There's never an end to that. There's never, a drop off point right there. It's more, well, why? You know what I mean? Or like, what do you mean you don't drink? So then usually I feel obligated, if you will, to explain that story. But in reference to that, so start off number one, and I feel like this is one of the most important things about me. I am a recovering drug addict. So, which is, I don't want to say recovery is too common, but the drug addict portion is very common in the area. And you'll see, you see as you moved up here, especially in the past couple of months, and you actually be living in here. I know Ashley's, you've been up here because Ashley's family and everything like that. But as far as my story goes, I feel like to give you a proper introduction, I pretty much have to elaborate all the way through. Right. So
whatever you feel comfortable with, sir.
Yeah. So, like I said, I grew up in this area, small town, technically graduated like 90 people. I know it's the exact opposite of where you went to high school and everything like that, down in the Lancaster area and stuff. But yeah, man, I grew up, throughout my childhood, I would have never deemed it anything other than normal. However, looking back and seeing other people's childhoods, it's the exact opposite of, what a lot of people consider a normal childhood. So I grew up in a family of crime and drugs, a lot of violence. But that was the norm to me, man. It was something I don't want to say I embraced, but I was kind of numb to the effects of it, if you will, until I got a little bit older. But because as a kid, man, I played sports. Even though I was on the low income side of things and my family was a little bit crazy. I technically, I guess you could consider me a popular kid, if you will. I was always like the assistant to the popular kid, you know what I mean? Like my one buddy Cody was, he was like the ladies' man and everything like that. He was like the really good basketball star and stuff like that. And I kind of just hung out there. You know what I mean? Like
you were like the next up.
Yeah. So basically it was, so one of the things that also kept me pretty level-headed up until like 5th grade was my grandmother. Right. So my mom and my dad were, like I said, doing their thing and living their lifestyle, which I technically was a part of, especially being in the household. But my grandmother, man, she was like the rock of our family. Like she was the last stand of morality, especially for me. But then going into my 5th grade year, I think I was 11 then. My grandmother passed away. So kind of from that stage, and it became a trend then, right? Especially in the mindset that I have dealing with so much internal stuff that I have. Right then and there, I swore to myself that I would do everything right. And I did the exact opposite. Right.
That's crazy.
So, and that actually, so at that point in time, I did not do drugs or alcohol. But I did start acting out. And it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't a conscious thing. It wasn't, like I had ill feelings and blah, blah. It just kind of happened that way. Mm-hmm. Whether it be, I wanted more attention, because one of the things that I found out, especially as I got older, is that because of my outcast, if you will, family, and being in contrast to my social standing, if you will. So like me hanging out with the friends I did and having a completely different family lifestyle than they did. I just wanted to be a part of, you know what I mean?
Was
like
this,
that's,
would you say that, because I know you said growing up, the lifestyle wasn't necessarily normal, but you didn't really realize anything different. Was this right around that age where you started to realize that maybe this isn't like the most normal thing, as you kind of started to get a little bit older and see some other families and friends where you kind of realizing that, all right, like maybe this isn't as normal as I probably thought it was?
Yeah. So like this is around the time when like, you know, like I say, going into middle school and stuff like that. And you're really like, because in elementary school, I mean, you have your friends, you have your friends. No one's really like popular or unpopular.
Mhm.
But you know, when I started, like I said, with my buddy Cody and stuff like that, and hanging around different groups of people, and then you know, going over their houses, and then always trying to evade everyone coming to my house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
so yeah, it's like you said. So like I always tell the story. Now I think it's funny. I mean, so keep in mind too. I don't want anybody to get the mindset that I laugh at tragedy. However, I do, right? So because that's one of my coping mechanisms, and I feel that's the best way for me and a lot of people to deal with a lot of stuff. But so, well, one of the funny stories that I always tell people is that we would, like, me and my friends would be walking downtown and be a little bit later in the night, and my dad would be off on one of his binges. So um, just like me, if not a little more, a lot more accessibly than me. My dad was a meth user,
Mhm.
right? So, um, and he would take off for 2 weeks at a time, you know. But I never knew where he was, right, in those 2 weeks. But my dad used to like do this weird, creepy thing, right, where he used to like hang downtown in like the corners of like buildings and stuff like that. Um, and then when he would see me downtown with my friends, he would come try to talk to me and like give me weird presents, right? Like some real sketchy drug addict presents, right? So like the one time walking downtown and he just pops out of nowhere, right? Like just like it's like 9 o'clock, just getting dark. Pops out of nowhere and he's like, "Yo, Zach, I got this for you, man." And I'm like, and all my friends are looking like, "Who's that guy? Like, he's really scary." You know, keep in mind, my dad is it like he was an outlaw biker his entire life, so he's this, you know, bald white dude, big beard, tatted up from the neck down. Like, he's a very scary dude, right? Like, makes babies cry scary, right? So he he's like, "Oh, I got this for you," and they're like, "Who is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's my dad." You know, like put my head down and stuff, and he like pulls out this big like Flavor Flav style like New York Yankees medallion like on a chain, like one of those ones they used to sell at the mall for like $10. You know what I mean? Like, um, and I was like, "Oh."
I've for reference, I've met Zach's father on multiple occasions. He's not a quiet guy. Like he's loud. He's very loud. He's a big dude.
Yeah, yeah. So and you know, by the grace of whatever power it may be, my dad is a way different person than he was in the story that I'm telling you now, and I'm very fortunate to have a decent relationship with my father now. But yeah, so like I said, back to that point, it just kind of, you know, went and everything that I swore I would not do or not become, I became.
Mhm.
And it's, I feel like that's the time when I started this horrible habit of like self-sabotage. As insane as it sounds, um, like it's still a trait that I carry with me today. You know, if I'm not keeping up with myself in the sense of if sometimes like, you know, for the most part, especially, you know, having some of my military habits still with me and stuff. I like to be very on top of things and stuff like that. But there's sometimes that if I'm not taking care of myself spiritually and emotionally, like I see myself doing it. Like if I have a deadline to hit and I'm like, okay, this is what you need to do to get this done by this deadline, and then just go sit in the couch. You know what I mean? And watch TV. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to catch myself, you know, and I'm like, okay, no, this is horrible. You know what this, you know, goes to. But like I said, that's been one that I've carried with me for a long time.
Yeah, I'm the same way, man. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if I just like I enjoy working under pressure. So sometimes I feel like I kind of try and trick myself into giving myself the least amount of time to do something possible, thinking
Yeah.
that it's just going to click for me and I'm gonna be like, oh, I'm going to knock this all out like it's not, you know. And then I start freaking out and start having panic attacks. Like I'm not getting this done, and then I just give up. I'm like, you know, it's not even worth it anymore. And it's
Yeah.
like I understand that cycle of just doing it to yourself over and over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it like I said, it's a horrible thing. The I don't want to say it's fortunate, but the better part of it is now it's with a lot less serious things, if you will. You know what I mean, than it was back then. So, and then pretty much, you kind of got worse and worse. As far as like
let me ask you this, so when your grandmother passed away, that's kind of when you started to notice things were kind of going down that slope. When was it that you kind of decided, all right, let me kind of dabble in whatever this is, and then how did things kind of progress from there?
Yeah, so that it was pretty much just like a behavioral thing, right? Like up until 8th grade. And then like 8th grade was an awesome year, like that's, and I would like to say it's for a lot of people, like 8th grade's like your senior year of middle school, you know what I mean? Like right before you're going into high school and stuff. And then that 8th grade summer. So like I said, swearing that I would never be certain things and then becoming them. So like all the way up until that point, I swore I'd, regardless of what I did, I would never do drugs, right? Like my parents did drugs. I know they did drugs. I'd never want to be like them. Well, 8th grade summer came around. Now, prior to this, I had drank, right? So a couple different times. I snuck out with my brother, blah, 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 so on and so forth, which is definitely not in any shape or form taboo. Especially for, our area, like you're usually drinking by 12, 13, 14 years old. So like I had drank up to this point, but I never did anything else. So then 8th grade summer goes around and there really wasn't a resistance. Like my one buddy like offered me to smoke weed and I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Right. So and then it just went from there. Right. So I am the stereotypical progression that posters from the 1980s, told all the kids about, like up until now, like, if you do pot, you will end up doing heroin and die. I mean, that's kind of where it went for me. Right. So, and it was, like I said, it was my family lifestyle. So it wasn't just using, but, I was also into a little bit of mobile street pharmacy, if you will, too. So that's kind of how it rolled, right? So, started off smoking weed, and then it kind of broke the seal, if you will.
So you were surrounded by it, not just from a using standpoint, but just kind of like that cycle. Like it was work, so to speak, but also something you did for leisure. Like you were surrounded by it no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to sit here and say that I was very successful at it, right? Because, monkeys can't sell bananas, right? So, I broke all the 10 crack commandments. But yeah, man. So like it went right from, smoking weed to doing pills to selling pills. And like I said, it's kind of like the straight up culture around here. It was nothing for me as a 15-year-old to, meet the strung out chick down the block outside the doctor's office when she got her script, you know what I mean? And bought the whole thing off her. Like it's easy, it's really effortless. Not saying that's an excuse, whatever, but
but I think that's a good point to bring up too, because it's like for a lot of people who end up getting help relatively soon, you either have one way or the other, you either have support. If you're struggling at home and home life isn't going so well and you're looking for support, typically you can look at friends or people in the neighborhood that are going on the right path who can kind of get you there. Or if your friends are kind of going down that wrong path, you typically have a good backbone and family to kind of help bring you up there. When family life is one thing, and not just your friends, but just the whole community is kind of one way. You really can't. How do you bring yourself out of that? You're everywhere you look is all the same. You just kind of it's like a vicious cycle.
Yeah, man. So again, I credited it back to the wanting to be a part of. So by this point, I had pretty much realized that there was no being a part of the better group. So like that. In my head, it was a lot easier to just be a part of my family life and that entire environment. So I went full-fledged into it, and I, thought I was going to be a killer, thought I was going to be, this big drug dealer and, these big grandiose ideas of, because like I said, that's what everybody else was doing, and no matter how much my dad disliked what I was doing because he was very well aware. And because like me and my brothers would do business together. Now at this point, I had my two older brothers. My oldest brother, Billy Jack, I mean, he was pretty much full blown at this point. And like I said, he was also one of the reasons, not just my parents, but I swore I would never do drugs again. He was one of my heroes, man. And I remember one time being young, I was probably like 8 years old, and he came home the one day, and I was messing around him. I knocked his hat off his head, and he had a bag of weed under it, and I cried for hours. Right? Yeah. I was, he was my hero, man. And like I said, that's just one of those pieces of irony, if you will. So
how old would you say? So at this point, you're using, selling, you're kind of all caught up into it. How old were you? Would you say at this point?
Like 14, like 13, 14, 15 is like the weed pill era. Then when I was 15, my buddy was dating this chick, and her older brother was a big coke dealer. Right. So we got it, like he would steal some from him, and we would get into that and stuff. But 15, like I was 15 at the time. That's when I tried meth for the first time, and that became my drug of choice, if you will.
Damn, 15. That's crazy, man.
Like
it's surreal sitting on the other end of here, because I've heard all these stories for anyone listening. Me and Zach have talked. I've heard all these stories privately and in different settings, but to just hear them now in a more, I don't know, I guess intimate setting is like I'm just playing it through in my mind. It's crazy, man. It's wild.
Yeah, man, and that was even so. Like me doing meth as a 15-year-old was even like crazy to my peers, like a lot of them, if you will. You know what I mean? Because they, like I said, they like a lot of my peers still up until this day and just smoke weed. You know what I mean? The ones that do use recreational drugs and stuff like that. And I just kind of went, you know what I mean? Like, all in.
What was it that was it just natural progression for you, or was there something you can kind of look at and be like, well, I think that's why I tried it? Like, what was or were you just curious?
Man, I can't really, put a finger on what exactly it was. So more to relate to my choice of being completely abstinent from any mind-altering substance today is just the fact of, it's just like I said before, like breaking the seal. Like as soon as like I do one thing towards something, it's kind of like the next time I think about it, or the next time there's like a more significant thing introduced to it, if you will, I'm kind of like, well, I already started. You know what I mean? Like, so in that sense, it's just like, well, I've been doing pills and stuff. I mean, I might as well try.
Might as well. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so like from there, and then pretty much at that point is kind of when my life went completely downhill. So I stopped playing sports. I remember my first year, or my first football practice in 10th grade. Right. Now my older brother, Jesse, and even my brother, Billy Jack, they were huge athletes for our school. And I was not to that caliber of athlete, if you will. I mean, I tried, I was a pretty athletic kid and stuff like that. But my coaches, they expected a lot from me. And then 10th grade year is when I just kind of went astray. Right. So like, I remember 2-a-days. I was up for 3 days before I went to 2-a-days. Right. Horrible idea. No. It was like 2 plays in to running drills, stuff like that. I got down on the line and I went to fire off the line, and I was so dehydrated that my calf muscle cramped and split in 2. Like you could see it. Yeah, it was horrible. I didn't eat nothing or drink anything for 3 days. And then I show up to 2-a-days and it's like 95 degrees. It's August. So kind of after that, I did not show up to football ever again. Right. Let's just put it that way. And in fact, that is also the time when I quit school. However, I quit school, but I was not old enough to officially quit school, even with parental consent at 15. So from that, I got involved with children and youth. Right. So, child services, they got involved because it'd been, so many weeks since I went to school. So they came in, did an assessment, wanted me to take a drug test. I took a drug test. I failed it, but it was just for marijuana. And then they kind of opened up a case on me, right? So like horrible things, man. Like she just, my caseworker just constantly tried to get me to go back to school. Even to the point where she's like, well, you got to do something. She's like, even if it's cyber school. So I'm like, yeah, whatever, I'll do cyber school. Well, they sent me this laptop and everything like that. I did one day on it. And then I'm not proud to say this, but I look back on it now just to tell you how horrible it was. I sold that laptop that the school gave me for drugs. I was not interested whatsoever. And I would get, but at this point she was drug testing me, but I was passing them because they were swab tests, and you can beat a swab test with Listerine. Now I know they're a little more advanced nowadays and stuff like that, but at that time I knew when she was coming. I knew if I, would switch Listerine, I knew how to beat them. And then one day she convinced me to actually go back to school. She's like, you're never going to do this unless you go back to school. So I went back for one day, and, she surprised me when I was in school with a urine test. So I took it, and I'm like, oh, now up to this point, pretty much before I took, now this is about a year and a half, about 16 going into 17. No. I was 17 going, there's about 2.5 years of this, right?
Damn.
17, just going into 18, like a couple months before, she got me to go back to school, right? So she surprised me with this urinalysis. 2 weeks prior to this, I had done every drug I could get my hands on. So now I started to dabble in, selling a bunch of stuff, if you will. Like I was selling heroin, selling pills, all that stuff. And I was doing some of it as well, right? Now, like I was, again, so there's one of those things, I swear I'll never do it. The only thing I pretty much have never done up in my career, if you will, is stick a needle in my arm. And that's not for a moral purpose. That's just because I stopped before I ever did it. Right. So, and I could just tell you that because a lot of the people that were in my circle ended up doing it. Mm-hmm. And I would have been right there with them, if not the first one, before everybody else. So like I said, up until this point, I'm up for probably like 8 days out of 2 weeks, just hopping around to a bunch of different houses, going to a bunch of different parties. So when she got the results back on this urinalysis, she again surprised me by telling me when I went back to school again another day. Excuse me. But so she waited till I was in school. She calls me into the office. I got the entire school board there, right? So, and I'm like, what is going on here? Right. So now keep in mind, in my delusional mind, up until this point, now, like I said, small area, right? So I pretty much know every single member of the school staff. They were all my teachers, if not my coaches. So going into this meeting, I'm like, what is she doing here with, all these people, right? So, and I think in my delusional mind that they only think I smoke weed, right? They don't know about everything else.
I don't know about everything else yet.
Yeah. Even though like I lose 30 pounds 1 week and then gain it back. You know what I mean? Just like that, like I haven't been at school. When I do show up at school, my eyes are bloodshot and pinned out and I don't know where I'm at, you know what I mean? Or I'm sleeping through half the day and getting in arguments with teachers and stuff. But yeah, so she said, Zach, we have the results back, and she was so nice too. I feel horrible. Still to this day. And she's like, I don't know what it is, but maybe you're at a party and somebody put stuff in your drink, but like your test results came back for this, 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 and this. And then all I can remember her is saying meth. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I never even seen meth. And like, I snapped out, right? Like this total horrible rage. And I left, right? So I left and I walked home. Well, she was at my house when I got home, right? We're sitting there talking for a little bit and we got into an argument. I pushed a piece of furniture over, left the house, said some really choice words, threatening words, if you will. And she called the cops, right? So from there, basically talking with the judge in the county and everything like that, they basically said that either I'm going to choose a rehab or I'm going to get tried as an adult for threats of bodily harm, or one of those charges, if you will. At the time, I had zero idea what rehab really was. Basically, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I'll go sit in a hospital again and eat Jello for 30 days. You know what I mean? Like, that's sounds like an easy day. You know, it was just to get them off my case. However, so from there, they sent me to like counseling for a couple of days. And my counselor gave me a list and was like, here, we'll even let you pick what rehab you want to go to. And I was like, you know, that sounds like a good one, right? So I picked it, went down to rehab. First of all, it was a culture shock. So it's in Harrisburg, right? I walk in. Yeah, it's in Harrisburg. I walk in. So it's an adolescent program, right? I walk in and I'm the only white dude in the place, right?
I believe
it. And that was it. I want to say it was more of a culture shock for everybody else. Like all the guys, like I walk in there like, who's this white dude? You know what I mean? Like, what's he doing here? But like, I was there, and so the facility I was in, it wasn't like your typical rehab. So it's considered a therapeutic community, right? So everybody has job functions and stuff like that, so on and so forth. But what that facility actually was didn't mean as much to me when I first got there, right? Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what it was like to be sober. I don't think was sober more than 3 days at a time before I went there. And like talking to the guys and stuff, I'm like, yeah, man, I can't wait to get out of here. And they're like, man, you ain't getting out of here, right? So just to give you a little bit of insight too, right? So like a lot of these dudes, they had criminal backgrounds, right? So a lot of them were from Philly. A lot of them came from Philly and they were sent there. So there's like less chance for them to run. Because it was basically like a second chance rehabilitation center. So like a lot of these dudes had criminal charges, failed the drug test on probation, and then they got sent here to, for like
basically
remediation,
like another opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and like the other thing is, like I said, like a lot of these dudes are coming from like detention centers and stuff, where the rules are a lot different. Like, they let you fight there, and not let you fight, if you will, but it's more accepted. You know what I mean? It's more of
strict.
Yeah. And this place was like, if we catch you fighting, like you're doing 2 years as an adult, like, in Camp Hill. So like there was, obviously it's a good thing, right? But there was a lot more tension, in this place. But like I said, I get along with everybody, man. And, that wasn't an exception there. Like I made friends really fast, or acquaintances, if you will. But anyway, so like I said, I was there for 28 days, and they brought me back to the county for court. So when I got back to court, though, there was a different judge, because my judge had been on vacation or something. The judge that I originally made the deal with, and he's like, Mr. Merook, how do you feel? And I was, I read him. I was on my soapbox, well, I'm a changed man and blah, blah, blah. And like just the day before, like I was on the phone with my buddies. And I'm like, yo, make sure you have a fat bag for when I come home. We're going to party. You know what I mean? But, I fed him all this BS, and he's like, ready to go home. And I was like, yeah, it's 30 days or 2 more days. And he's like, I'm looking over your paperwork here. And he's like, it doesn't say, give a time limit. It says that you have agreed to complete the program of treatment, and the program that you're in is a 4 to 6 month program. Ooh. And I'm like, okay. Right. So there was not much I could do at that time. Right. So we went back, and they saved lunch for me, and I'm sitting there eating lunch, and I'm thinking, I'm like, you know what? I might as well listen. You know what I mean? At least listen to these people. You know, so, and like the staff members there were awesome. You know, you had a lot of recovering drug addicts. You had some former corrections officers, you know, a lot of people that just really, they really gave you insight, you know what I mean, on what can happen or what's going to happen if you continue to do it.
Future could look like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I started to listen, and it started to make sense. You know, and it definitely, so I'm a very firm believer that not everybody that is going to recover needs to go to a rehab. However, I was one of those people that needed to. And like rehab, it was great in that sense, you know. So like children and youth, all those experiences saved my life up until that point. And then following that, it was everybody outside in my community of recovery, if you will, that still to this day continues to save my life. So they tell you the entire time, right? So it was a little bit mix of NA and AA, and, you know, rehab stuff, if you will, as compared to 12-step stuff. There's a whole bunch of different things. You know, I basically just took the core of the message. But basically they say, you know, go to meetings. When you get out, don't go hang out with your friends and stuff. Get to a meeting right away. And I was like, yeah. You know, I'm ready to do this, you know?
So you got out with the right mentality. You got out, you made some friends, enjoyed the people in there. You got out and were like, I feel pretty good.
Yeah. So especially like halfway through, right? Like I felt extremely confident. Because, so like I said, there was a structure in there, like as far as like job functions and stuff go. Like, you know, you had your kitchen dudes, and then there was a leadership structure, right? So the staff members thought it would be hilarious if the only white dude in the place was the leader of the entire, and like I said, so there's a lot of tension. You don't get to fight like you would, you know, and settle your problems and stuff like that, which, you know, contrary to what other people believe, is very important for young men. All right.
Yes, indeed. I approve of this message.
Yeah. So like I said, let alone peers, you know, and not to, you know, delve too much into the race thing, if you will, but I mean, you could ask anyone in a minute, they thought the same thing as me, let alone their peer. They didn't want, you know, some hick white kid, you know, from the mountains coming up and, you know, telling all these dudes that are, you know, hardened dudes, you know what I mean? Like living in the inner city, you know what I mean? Getting shot at, shooting, you know, back just to survive. Like these dudes that want me to tell them what to do in this stupid rehab that they're just in because they failed the piss test. You know what I mean? Making sure they like tighten their bed up and stuff. You know what I mean? Like it was, so that was, but like I said, it really came to the point where, you know, we had each other's respect, you know, and we, regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of, you know, the color of our skin or anything like that, we respected each other, you know? And it wasn't hard for me. So like I said, a little bit of a culture shock. But I've really never had, you know, any racist inclinations ever. And that's pretty rare coming from the area that I'm from. Yeah. You know, it's just like, you know, man, like it's, you know,
I know
95% Caucasian, you know?
So what happens? So what happened after rehab? So you're fresh out, you're feeling good, clear, thinking, you know, things are going to be good. What does life look like when you get back?
Yeah. So like I said, man, I was really confident coming out. Cause like I said, I overcame that, you know, came out of there, you know, with good relationships, felt really confident about myself. And like, so my family had a, you know, coming home party for me that day, you know, no extracurriculars involved, you know, it was just food and friends over and stuff like that. Cause my family's been very supportive of my recovery, regardless of what they did. And I get home and I keep remembering, go to a meeting, go to a meeting, go to a meeting. And I'm like, oh, it gets to the point. I'm like, oh, I'm tired. I just want to see my family. It's been a long time, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to go to a meeting. 10 minutes after I thought that in my head, my buddy's dad, who has been in recovery for, he just passed away, actually, God rest his soul. But up until this point, he had been in recovery like 20 years, right? I hear this honking, right, outside. And I go out, I open the door, go outside, and there's my buddy's dad sitting there. He looks at me, he said, get in the car, right? So there I go, get in the car. He took me to a meeting right then and there. Not only did he make me go, he made me speak at the meeting, right? Yeah, so we went to an inner rehab meeting, so to another rehab where they let people come in. And anyway, he made me speak, and I'm terrified. And I'm like, what? I just got sober. Like, he's like, I'm like, I have 4 months sober and it's only because of rehab. He's like, yeah, well, guess what? There's a lot of people in there that have 2 days sober. So you tell them how you did it. Right.
Yeah, that's so sick. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, no. And it's been like that ever since. Right. So I'm extremely fortunate for the people, man. And being in the 12-step program that I'm in, it really is a miracle to see a lot of these people, and, it's crazy to think, some people have their different viewpoints and stuff as far as what constitutes when you should recover or what you are for an addict or an alcoholic.
Yeah, like I say the same thing too. Everyone's definition of like rock bottom looks very different depending on who you are, your morals, your values. Everyone's rock bottom looks different.
Yeah, absolutely. And basically seeing these people come in that are, still out there using and trying to get sober. They're 50 years old, 40 years old. And, they're, look at it and they're like, I wish I would have got sober when you did, like that stuff. But it wasn't a question to me, like everyone would be like still I'd meet people and they're like, oh, you were really young. You're only, 18. Yeah, but if you look about what I did from 13 to 18, could you imagine what would have happened at 20, at 25?
You might not be here.
Yeah, especially so like looking at like I lost both of my older brothers from overdoses. So my older brothers that I talked about previously, now this is later. So getting sober, I had to go back to school, right? Because nothing that I wanted to do would let me go in with a GED, right? So I had to go back and get my diploma. So I went back to school, got my diploma, 2 rough years, right? If you will. I did 7 long years in high school. No, yeah, 2 extra years. And then through that time, I did like the school to work program and stuff. And worked a lot and stayed busy, stayed very active in the 12-step program. And then the one day, I'm sitting there trying to figure out what I actually want to do, right? I'm like, oh, I go to college, but who's going to pay for college? Blah, 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 this and that. Thought about a bunch of different things. And one day my buddy showed up at my house. He's like, yo, I'm joining the Marine Corps. And I was like, oh, cool. And he's like, you should join with me. And I was like, I was like, why not? Let's do it. Right. So we went in and filled out.
Like,
yeah,
sure.
it's really just like that. Like I thought about it for a little bit, but I'm like, it's always been my dream to get out of this small town and, blah, 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 this and that. And I was like, it's a job. It doesn't cost me anything, and I'm going to get education benefits. Right. So I went to the recruiter's office. He's like, what do you want to do, man? And he's like, your GT scores. He's like, it's pretty solid, man. He's like, you kind of pick any job you want. And I'm like, I want to go to war. And he's like, I got you, man. He's like, that's the same thing that I said. He's like, when you join, he's like, so I signed up for the infantry. I'm not trying to glorify war or anything like that, but that was the only thing I knew. You know what I mean? Like that's what I thought you joined the Marine Corps for. Right. Yeah. And like my grandfather was a Marine in World War II. My great grandfather, Marine in World War II. He was an infantry dude. And I just felt like that was the only route for me to go. Right. So I ended up going through with it and my buddy bailed. Right. So it was, got all the paperwork. I got my boot camp date. he stopped right before that and begged me.
Mm-hmm.
So there it was, though. I was too late to turn back, right?
You're already fully in.
Yeah. So from there, man, it is like, I was concerned at first as far as my sobriety and stuff like that.
That's what I was going to ask you. I had two questions. One, what is it like being in the military, being a recovering addict? Because I'm not in the military, never been. My brother's been in for a while, so I don't have a comment on whether or not there's drugs at all involved. It's not, but alcohol is different. So what was it like being a recovering addict in the military and being, having alcohol around and just people? That's kind of like when you're not working, it seems to be like what a lot of people do, just kind of hang out and drink.
Yeah, man. So like I said, it was something I was very concerned about, right? Especially because all the horror stories I heard about being a brand new boot in like the Marine Corps infantry, right? So like once you get in, there's, your initiation phase, if you will. So like go through boot camp, you go to infantry school, and then you hit the fleet, right? And then, regardless of what anybody thinks, boot camp is nothing compared to your first couple weeks as a brand new infantry Marine in the fleet. Getting woken up at 2 a.m, going on runs, having to low crawl, out and thing, pick up cigarette butts. It's not saying, I'm not saying it's the worst by any means, right? Like you adapt to it pretty quickly, right? But that's definitely the scariest part of, like, regardless of boot camp, all that stuff. But like one of the biggest things I always heard is that, people, just like they do in frats, right? Like they force people to get smashed, right? Which I was just like, hey, I'm down for whatever, I fully accept the tradition of initiation, but I'm not going to do that. What was the exact opposite, right? So, like obviously all that stuff, I went through all that stuff. However, all of my senior Marines were very supportive of the fact that I was in recovery, right? So, and also I had the opportunity of very early in the fleet of running an indoc and getting into a scout sniper platoon in the Marine Corps, which the significance of that in this is that it's a selective unit, right? So everybody that's there wants to be there, and it's usually like older dudes, right? So you usually have, as opposed to your 18, 19-year-old dudes, you usually have like, 25, 26, 27, 28-year-old dudes in there. So it's a little bit more mature, if you will. I mean, don't get me wrong. My boys were still as crazy as the rest of them, right? If not crazier. But they had a little bit more life experience outside of the military under their belt. A little more maturity.
That's funny. We not to cut you off, but it was just on my mind right now. It's funny that earlier we were talking about how easy it is to kind of get involved in the life and not really be able to recover when you don't have that support system, when you're kind of surrounded by that negativity. And then, as you got into rehab, you had support around you. As you got out, you said your buddy's dad took you to meetings and was supportive, so you had that around you. You went and got into the military, and your senior Marines there were supportive of you. So it's like, it's funny just to see the contrast between being at home and not really having that support, and then every level of everything that you did afterwards, there were always people there who were kind of cheering you on, making sure you stood on the right path. Do you credit having that support system with keeping you on the right track?
100%. It was, don't get me wrong, I have to do a decent amount of the footwork, but the rest of it's everybody else. And it's not, so like, especially in recovery, it's not like nothing's really a secret, right? So like all these, like even for recovery, they're still they follow the same general criteria as success in anything else in life. They just like you have all the successful people, all the motivational speakers, it's who you surround yourself with, right? Like stick with the winners type deal. You will become a product of what you surround yourself with.
Yeah, I 100%. You are. So it's a few people have that same quote or similar one, but something around becoming a product of the company that you keep around you. So the whoever you keep around you, regardless of how close you are with these people, it's you become a product of the company you keep around you. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, man, and especially, you know, like I said, throughout that journey in the Marine Corps with me, everything we did from units and deployments and stuff like that. One of my really good buddies, Eric, man, like he was with me the entire time, and we have, you know, nothing but genuine love for each other. And like he'd always, you know, compliment me and, you know, encourage me to keep doing the right thing, and, you know, say how, you know, I was an inspiration to him, you know, and at the same time, I looked up to him just the same. You know what I mean? Like that was my relationship with a lot of my other buddies as well. You know, that was contrary to popular belief. All right. In the Marine infantry, there's a lot of really intelligent, good-hearted dudes, right? It's not just a bunch of, you know, knuckle dragging dudes that just, you know, want to shoot guns and lift weights and get smashed. You know, I've met the highest caliber of man, if you will. And I only say man specifically because when I was in, there was no females in the infantry, right? So I was surrounded with an all-male presence, which, like I can accredit to a lot of my success still to today. Because
All right. Thank you for joining us. Had to take a little break right here, but we are back talking to Zach about his journey, some struggles, and where we are right now is Zach's at rehab, doing well, decides to join the military. So he's in the Marines, has a good support system around him, met a lot of great guys. And we're kind of just in the midst of talking about what the military did for him. So kind of on the tail end of that, Zach, I guess I really wanted to ask if you had to quickly describe, just in a few seconds, what the military did for you in terms of just being a recovering addict. What kind of morals and values it kind of instilled in you? What would you say that is?
So I'd say my two biggest takeaways would have to be camaraderie. So like I said, that support system. Not necessarily instilled in me, but showed me the importance of it, and showed me actually how important to my life, especially as a recovering addict it is. And the other thing too is self accountability. So that's, you know, that's 4 years where there's no such thing as calling off work, not showing up on time. You know, you're responsible for not only yourself, but you're responsible for the lives of everybody around you.
That's
so
huge.
I guess you'd say the gravity of the job and the accountability piece was huge for me and still is. So, like I said, there's so many things. I could go on and on and on. It goes the same for a lot of dudes, regardless of how many people bitch and moan and say, "Oh, I can't wait till I get out" and stuff. There's so many great things that come with that, right? So, like I said, not to hit too much on this, but like another big thing was, like I said, being surrounded with such a huge, positive, powerful male presence, right? Was important for me because it's something that I lacked growing up, right? So I still had my role models, but none of them were necessarily positive, if you will.
I resonate with that. You know, so my mom and dad divorced when, you know, I was younger, and then my stepdad was around. He was similar stories such as yourself. And so I had men in my life, but none of them were really that role model that I was looking for. So it was, it's weird because as I started to get older and I started to meet some other like strong males who had, you know, good principles and morals and values, I kind of started to model myself after them, which at first I thought was weird because I'm like, I have a dad, like I have men in my life, but it wasn't until I got older that I really realized, well, none of them were really like a role model for me. You know what I mean? It was, my mom was really that role model for me as a male figure, which is weird because she's really, you know what I mean? She's really not, but she was really the only one. She kind of had to play both parts, mom and dad. So she's really the only person who I ever, in my younger years, looked after as kind of that role model. But it wasn't until I got older that I started pulling I don't know, what's the word that I want to look for? Just who I wanted to model myself as, from like other men that I just happened to meet throughout my life.
Did you cut out?
Maybe a little bit. Phone ringing. Let me just pause this right quick. All right, so we're talking about male role models, and just kind of overall values of what the military did for you. I do have another question. I have an interesting question, one that I haven't really been able to ask too many people, just with who've had this similar situation that you've had. So you're a great example of somebody I can ask this question to. So while you were in the military, I guess towards the tail end, you met your now wife, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes,
so that was kind of long distance for a little bit, and you guys were able to be together. What is it like being someone in your early 20s when it's kind of like the prime of everyone's life, when most people are going out drinking and staying out late and not necessarily getting into trouble, but kind of living their early 20s, that wild life? What's it like being someone at that age who doesn't want any part of that, but is trying to date in that age range? You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. So, I mean, like, some people may disagree with this, right? However,
controversial statement. Let's go.
Yeah. Some people may disagree with this, right? However, I was taught very early on that we do not get sober to hide from the rest of the world, right? So one of the most important things about our recovery is that we can go anywhere, right? And not be scared, right? Because it's one of the things we used to live in was fear. So I will say that the obsession to drink or do drugs was taken from me pretty early, right? So it may have, in the beginning when I first got out of rehab, maybe once and twice, but I've never had a legitimate urge, you know, and I'm very fortunate for that. Now, would it come back if I didn't take care of myself? Absolutely, 100%. However, like I didn't have that urge to, you know. Now, if I ever felt uncomfortable, I got out of a situation. However, I went everywhere, you know, the boys went, you know, playing pool, so like some of the things that I would do when they were drinking and getting crazy and stuff is, you know, like I said, you know, going to the bar and, you know, playing pool, staying away from, you know, all the, like most of the alcohol and stuff like that. But yeah, man, it just, you know, I lived off the social aspect. You know, I'm a very social person, you know, I like to joke around and stuff. So I stayed in the social aspect, and I never felt pressured, you know, like I said, they respected that. No one ever, you know, pressured me into doing anything like that.
Now with you being such an open book and you not shying away from telling your story, how important was it for you to, in dating anyway, to have someone who, because I'm sure you can tell your story to a lot of different people and they'll be like, oh, that's awesome, that's great for you, but finding a partner who actually more than just is happy for you, but is like supportive of your lifestyle now, like how important was that when you found that? Like, see, these are questions I never got to ask you before, but when we're gonna put Nas on the spot, she doesn't know, she'll see this on YouTube, but like how supportive was she, or like how did that conversation take place? Was it kind of one of those things where she's like, yeah, well, that's cool, but you know, or was it like, oh wow, like this guy's legit?
Yeah, so real quick, I gotta go into the backstory of how we met a little bit, right? Because that's what I kind of. So as far as with Nasia, right? So and I have to tell the backstory because I always say that like Nasia is like my angel, right? So at this point in time, I was not doing so well as far as, you know, moral things. I wasn't drinking or doing drugs or anything like that. But I wasn't keeping up with my morality and my spirituality. I was, you know, getting into some, I guess you say, like depressive thoughts and stuff like that, a little more negative attitude toward things. Then at that time, my brother passed away. So we're on a deployment. My brother passed away. I came home for 10 days. Like I said, I was in a really bad place, right? With myself and with the grieving process as well, my brother and stuff. And a mutual friend of ours actually introduced us, right? So at the time, I didn't even want to go out, right? He's like, hey, let's go see my friend. She's waitress at the place, blah, 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 this and that. So I'm like, whatever, man, I'll go, right? So I go out with him, we go down, whatever, go ahead. And I see her. And I forget the conversation that came up, right? And I was like, yeah, man, like I said, like someone like her, I could never date someone like her because she's like one of those chicks that's so beautiful you'd have to like sell your soul to be with them, right? Like that's the exact words out of my mouth, right? So like me and this like grumpy, like, I don't really like any humans right now. Like I don't want to be around anybody. I made that statement, and then I go to the bathroom. I come out, and he goes, "Yo, she thinks you're cute." And I was like, "Oh, really?" It quickly changed right off the bat. As much of a hard ass as I wanted to seem, and we actually, after she got off work, we actually hung out that night, and just more and more that like she was pretty shy, right? So my friend, like with her being there, would tell me things about her, Nazi can sing too, and like, Nazi does this, and I'm like, oh, so she really is too good to be true, right? Like all this stuff, which still to this day, Nazi and everybody around her knows that like first of all, she's the exact opposite of me, right? So whatever she touches becomes better. Right?
For anyone listening who's not, whether or not you're familiar with it, Zach's not trying to get brownie points. He really does talk about Nas like this all the time. Just Zach's not scoring brownie points.
Legitimately though. So like I said, like she's like my angel, right? So like at that point where I thought that I didn't want to invest myself in anybody emotionally or anything like that time, in comes her, right? And she wouldn't have it any other way. All right. So like I said, we started a relationship, if you will, even though, we were only technically spent time with each other for 3 days. We stayed in contact and pretty much a full-blown relationship, if you will, through the entire time I finished out my deployment, got home. I had 5 months left in the Marine Corps, and we got an apartment back home here in Pennsylvania. And, whether or not this is allowed, I drove home every weekend from North Carolina, my last 5 months. Because it's just, man, like, it's still to this day, I tell her, and like you said, like getting corny and cheesy, like from that point that I met her, just her aura and the way she is just, it made me feel like Superman, man. Like it gave me my confidence back. It gave me my drive back. And it's like in a bittersweet kind of way too, because so like you said, like not only is Nazi extremely accepting of who I was and who I am, but she holds me accountable. So we go back to the accountability, right? And it's so like my whole life, like I said, lacking male role models and stuff like that. My goal, I remember from very, very small child, like other kids, they wanted to be pro football players and stuff like that. All I ever wanted to do was have my own family and be a good dad and husband, right? Like I was like the male version of like the little girl that wants to be a bride in a dress. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to be a dad, dude. That's all I wanted to be. And be a good dude. Like I said, the people that I eventually came to be my idols were what I was technically searching for my entire life of who I wanted to be and how I wanted to act, right? And up until the time, like the period of time before I met Nasia, I forgot a lot of that, right? Just as far as, like continuing to do the things that got me sober. So being selfless, going out, helping other people, like I said, checking my moral compass, making sure I'm not doing stupid stuff, make sure I'm not doing behaviors that I was doing when I was drinking and drugging, even though I'm not drinking and drugging. And Nazi did, and still to this day holds me accountable to all that, So, and that's
awesome.
It's huge. It's
That's
huge.
awesome.
Like I said, it's bittersweet because it's not like this, it's not always this like, well, first of all, number one, right, and she'll tell you herself, Nasi is not like the super motivational, affectionate type, right? Like she's not
No,
the like, you know,
what? Nas?
yeah, she's not the like, here's your lunchbox on the way out the door, like go get him, baby type. She's like, yo, you're being a dick again, knock it off. You know what I mean? Like, you know how this turns out, you know what's gonna happen, you know. That's how she's there for me. You know what I mean? She does love me. She shows her love. That's not I'm not saying she doesn't, right? I'm just saying like her value to me is so significant because it's the stuff that extremely matters, right? Like I said, so there goes into accountability, into, you know, camaraderie, if you will, commitment. I mean, she has all of it. Like I said, a lot of times it's a bite that I don't like the taste of, you know what I mean? But you know, nonetheless, it's something that I absolutely need to survive.
Awesome, man. I mean, it's crazy because you kind of look at your life now, and we're talking about it now. You're approaching your 30s, right? You are married.
I don't want to talk about it.
Married, 3 kids, have a house, have a job, out of the Marines. Now you're in the Army now. You have what a lot of people don't have. You have what you've always wanted and what you strive for. But to be where you are right now and kind of look back at how far you've come, how does it feel? What's that feeling like?
I couldn't put it in words, man. You know, so my one of my good buddies, Ozzy, man. You know, he was actually, you know, he's a lot older than me. Was a lot older than me. He just recently passed away. But I knew him since I was a kid, man. I knew him, you know, when we were both in our addictions. I knew him when we were both sober. And I was a very insightful dude, right? Extremely insightful. And pretty much my motto for life it was one that he had, and it's that life is just a collection of experiences, right? And it's what comes out of those experiences that mold the future. So it's just the experiences that I've had and continue to have. They're crazy, man. You know, and it's like I said, it's all opportunity, right? So it's by no means is it all, you know, butterflies and rainbows nowadays. You know, but I have this support group. I have the family. I have the wife that I'm extremely confident in my ability to get through anything, because we get through it together. And that's huge.
That's awesome, man. What?
Like I said,
go ahead.
Like I said, it's just so like experience, man. So like getting out of the military, got a job at a warehouse, right? For, you know, no need to name the company. Got a job at a warehouse to start off there, you know, order filling boxes, you know, freight handling, and then I had no thought in my mind, especially because I'll be completely honest with you, like getting out, I was in a horrible mindset, right? So getting out, I was in this, you know, how hard could this job be, blah, 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 this and that. And the job kicked my ass, dude. It really did, because, you know, there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into the way you have to operate the job, if you will. And like, so in that time too, since I got out, like my other brother passed away, I felt this, I don't want to say, it really wasn't a void, right? I called it a void, but it really wasn't a void. There was just this difference in lifestyle change, as in the sense of, you know, I'm used to a job where I live with the dudes I work with. You know, I know them very well. Going into where, you know, regardless of what anybody says, you know, there's an ego portion that, you know, that comes with the military, if you will, like in the sense of when I was in the military, you would only come home once in a while, right? So you come home once in a while. So when everybody sees you, they're happy to see you, blah, 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 this and that. Now you're just always there, and it's kind of back to normal, right? So, you know.
Hold on one second, real quick. Like 2 seconds.
Can you hear me?
Yep. So you were saying, so now you
Can
just.
you hear me?
Yep.
All right, we're good?
Yep, we're good. Good to go. All right. Well, last but not least, I mean, a couple of things to go over really quick before we wrap up. But most important thing I wanted to ask is advice. What advice would you give someone who was struggling? advice that you would give someone who wasn't in a good place, who's into, drugs and just really struggling with life? Because I know you said rehab isn't for everybody. So, what's something you could give to someone that might be beneficial?
Yeah, so I hate to be that person to go ahead and just talk about what works for me, right? But I do my thing. So I'm involved in a 12-step program. That's where I need to be at, right? But for anybody who's struggling, help, accept the help. Nobody gets through life alone, right? And as much as I say that, at the same time, I often say too is that for the family members of someone who's struggling, that you're struggling right there with them and you're confused because they're not getting better or not trying to get better. Everybody has their own process, right? And sometimes it's just not the time, right? So like you said, everyone's bottom's different. And it's a horrible tragedy to say, but not everybody makes it. And it's like for me, like I said, so like in my active addictions, like I swear I'd never do things again and end up doing them. There are times where you legitimately could have put me on a polygraph test and I would have said I'd never do drug again, and I would have passed it. And 3 hours later, I was high. It's hard to say, man. You got to keep going at it regardless. You got to keep going at it. Seek help. If you're not ready to seek help, when the help comes to you, accept it and keep trying. Nobody gets through life alone. And that statement's very important to me, because I'm a very small by myself, right? But together we're a very big power, in any body of human beings, right? We're a pack animal. So that's very important.
That's dope, man. That's huge. It's a lot of people try and go at things solo, whether it's recovery, anything in life. A lot of people try and go at things solo. I know me, I'm pretty competitive. So like naturally I don't like to ask for help. It's actually really hard for me to ask for help. But I'm very appreciative when someone notices that I need it and just kind of like chimes in, because they know that I typically won't ask for it.
Yeah, man.
So it's huge. Oh man, Zach, any last words? I know we talked about a lot today. Your upbringing, your recovery, rock bottom, kind of where you are today. Anything else that you wanted to add out there for anybody viewing?
No, man, not really. I mean, sorry, for blabbing a little bit too long about a bunch of stuff.
Oh no, you're good.
As long as we hit on the big points there, no, man. But I know the title of your channel here. One of the things I have to say, man, is by no means in any way, like I can't tell you how much I appreciate you asking me on. And I'm always grateful to share my story. So going on with the camaraderie thing, no, by no means in any way am I a hero. But I'm very fortunate to share my life with many people that are heroes.
And the name of this is the Real Heores Network. It means a lot to me to have you on as our first hero. Zach is extremely humble, but I look at Zach like a hero. He's actually very inspiring to me, and just what he's been able to overcome. It's funny. It's like we all look at our lives, and the one thing we shouldn't do is something we're all guilty of doing, is comparing who is in a worse spot, right? Like I look at my problems, I look at Zach's problems, and I'm just like, man, if Zach can get through his, I can get through mine. And we shouldn't be comparing tragedies or trauma or what people went through, but naturally we all just end up doing it. And anytime that I've been in like a rough patch, I'm just like, damn, like I'll have a conversation with Zach and he'll tell me something, and I'm like, I gotta get my shit together. Like I'm bitching for no reason. Like, look at this guy right here. So like Zach inspires me. I didn't know Zach prior to how many years is it? 4 or 5, maybe roughly 4 or 5 years ago. So I can't attest to who he was before. All I can talk about is the man that he is now. A very good friend of mine, family actually, inspiring guy, cool guy. He's just look at him. I just want to kiss him right in the cheek. Just look at that guy right there. He's a good dude, which is one of the goals that he set out for in life, and I can attest to that firsthand. That's exactly what he is. Good husband, good father, and he is our first official hero, Zach.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for one-upping me there, Jess. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Totally shut me down. No, man, I really appreciate it, man. And it's, like I said, it's very humbling for, like you said, because, I look at you the same way, man. I mean, it's kind of me and you against the rest of our wife's families, but.
I'm going to edit this part out. We're just
No, but yeah, man, I'm extremely grateful to be on here, man. And, I always like to share my story. Because like you said, man, regardless if it's not exactly what somebody else is going through, there's always motivation in every story, right? So
yeah, man, these videos can get 1 view, they can get 100,000 views. To me, it's honestly not about, I said this on the podcast, and it's the same thing for the YouTube channel. This whole thing that that we're doing here is not about views. It's not about monetizing anything. I really just want to put positive energy out into the world, man. If I can make a difference in someone's life, even if it's just one person, then I'll feel like I've accomplished something. I really just want to help people, and I always feel like everybody says that. Everybody's always like, yeah, I just want to help people, I want to do good in the world, but we're on the go 24/7. It's like there's never any time to stop and breathe, and we feel like I don't even have the time to be able to help people. So right now I wouldn't be doing anything but watching football, drinking coffee, sitting on my, honestly not doing anything. And so why not take an hour to have a good conversation, put some good out into the world, upload this, and if I can change somebody's life with Zach's story here, why not?
Absolutely, man.
So
100%.
Zach, thank you for stopping on, being our first hero today. Special surprise, Zach does not know, but the promo to our conversation here, and I guess the next few, is actually going to be none other than Nasia, Zach's wife, my sister-in-law, is going to be doing she already did. I'm going to be editing her promotion for the Real Heores Network prior to our conversation. So if you want to know who Zach is gushing about, you'll be able to see her on YouTube.
Cool. That's a good thing too, because she's one of my heroes.
Yeah. So we are going to have Nasia on here probably in about a week or two. But Zach, to wrap up, thanks, man. Appreciate having you on. We'll talk off mic for a little bit.
All right. Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, man.